The world's a pretty big place. With our busy lives, no reasonable person can be expected to keep up with the biggest headlines each week, so I'm here to do it for you. This is Tony Pearson coming to you on behalf of WHIP with this week's Big Picture. Hello everyone. On today's episode of The Big Picture, we're actually going to change things up a little bit. It's going to be a bit shorter than usual, and we're not going to spend the first however many minutes talking about the election. Truth be told, not that much new happened this week regarding the election besides the debate, so I'm going to talk very briefly about what's going on, and then we're going to talk about other things. It's nice. I've been waiting for this to happen. So on the topic of that debate and some politics this week, the third debate is over. It was not as heated as the others were. Most sources are still painting Hillary Clinton as the winner of the debate. That being said, the effects of the debate on polls and stuff like that won't be available until next week. It takes some time to calculate that, get all the voices in, stuff like that. There were no major new controversies regarding Donald Trump. I'm sure that will change in the next couple of weeks leading up to the election, but for now, nothing new crazy happened. It's just all the stuff from before. As far as the Hillary campaign goes, more emails have been released, and they're all kind of showing us more evidence for what we already know, which is that the Democratic primaries were very heavily coordinated with Clinton's campaign, and that she's just kind of a really corrupt politician. While I still think, and hey, opinions, Hillary's more qualified than Trump is, this doesn't change the fact that she's very clearly a corrupt politician. In fact, I'm kind of worried by how little this is affecting her campaign. This is a huge deal. Evidence is being released every single week that points to blatant corruption coming from her campaign, leading all the way back to the beginning of this election season. Like I said, does that make her less qualified than Trump? Well, no, but if you're going to be electing her, which I know a lot of people who are, you really ought to know. This really is a stinky election. But luckily, that's all I've got to talk about it today. Moving into other non-political U.S. news, the first new nuclear reactor to be finished in 20 years was finished this week in the Tennessee Valley. The Watts Bar Unit 2 cost approximately $4.7 billion to construct, and it's all done. It's ready to be turned on and start powering homes. This story makes me happy because I'm a big fan of nuclear power. It's something that scares a lot of people, but with troubles with fossil fuels and stuff like that, nuclear power is a very, very realistic alternative to many of the less savory methods that people use today, such as coal and natural gas. There are a lot of pros and cons of nuclear energy. Starting out with the pros, is very, very clean besides the nuclear waste that it creates. And I know that's like, no duh. But the important part about this cleanliness is that it's not releasing greenhouse gases. Nuclear fission creates nuclear waste, which is, highly radioactive material. But as long as nothing happens to kick that stuff into the air or anything like that, you can bury that material or move it around or do whatever with it, really. It's not just lost into the air in the same way that greenhouse gases are when you, for example, burn coal at a power plant. Additionally, nuclear power plants generate a ton of energy. They are extremely efficient when it comes to the fuel that they use, and with new thorium reactors starting to come onto the scene, fuel is practically a non-issue. Unlike with fossil fuels, where people are kind of freaked out about what we're going to see in the next 50 or so years, we can keep on using nuclear reactors for a very, very long time before we have to worry about running out of fuel. That being said, there are cons to nuclear power. The power plants themselves are an extremely expensive investment. Like I just said, this new one costs $4.7 billion to construct, and they must be built very well and carefully, because when things do go wrong with nuclear power plants, they go really, really wrong. At this point, I have to say that when everything is done right at a nuclear plant, there are very rarely issues, and when there are so many safeguards in place that will shut down the reaction before it gets bad. But if you build your power plant, say, on the coast, where something like a tsunami can affect it, like what happened in Japan with the Fukushima power plant, things can get really bad. Or if you just ignore all kinds of safety standards and don't keep your building up to code like they did in Russia with Chernobyl, things will get really, really bad. So I think as long as power plants are built up to code and carefully, I think nuclear power is a great thing. But hey, opinions. Moving on to tech news, there was a huge announcement this week from none other than Nintendo, a company which is famous for its various video games and video game consoles, but which has been kind of struggling lately with their latest console, the Wii U, which just hasn't been selling very well. Nintendo just announced its next console, the Nintendo Switch. So they did this by releasing a video showing the Switch in action. In short, it is a really neat handheld tablet console hybrid. So it comes with a stand, not unlike the Nintendo Wii, and it will play on a TV. But if you lift the center of the console out, it's like this modular thing, it's actually a tablet with its own screen, which you can then play on the go. The video then goes on to show all the different ways you can configure the controllers and all the different situations you can use the console, plugging it into TVs, walking around with it, using it in a car, using it on an airplane, stuff like that. I just think it's really cool, and I think it's going to do well, and I'll tell you why. Lately, consoles haven't been doing quite as well as they have in the past. This is because one of the big advantages of having a game console is that in the past you've been able to just plug in a video game and it would just work. This is why people would often go with consoles over the PC, because when you're playing on a PC, you have to install the game and get internet stuff all set up, and it can be a bit complicated. However, with the more recent consoles like the PS4 and Xbox One, you now have to install and download games. There are day one patches and all this awful stuff, and it makes it really difficult to just plug it in and use it. That was the huge selling point of most consoles. Now that that's gone, that's kind of why PC gaming is starting to come back and consoles aren't doing so hot. I think this is a clear indicator that consoles need to start doing something new if they want to retain their users. In the case of Nintendo, this something new has been taking the graphical fidelity of a sit-down plug-in console and trying to bring it to something handheld, which even the best gaming laptops have a hard time doing. With an intuitive design and a good lineup of games, I think Nintendo might do really well with this decision. I know it's the first console I've considered buying in years. Additionally, another cool thing about the Nintendo Switch is that it starts this really cool new partnership with Nintendo and Nvidia. Nvidia is the company behind, I want to say, a little bit more than half of the graphics cards in PCs. For those of you who do not know what a graphics card is, there are a lot of different things that run inside of any computer, and consoles are just different kinds of computers, so this includes them. Graphics cards are a part of the computer that handles all of the images you see on your screen. It actually takes a lot of horsepower to stick images on your TV. So computers and the like have dedicated parts that process all that information. Nvidia is pretty much the company to go to for these things, and they've partnered up with Nintendo to make really small, portable graphics card technology, which they are apparently going to be putting in this new console. With this very cool, very specialized technology, they're going to be able to have graphics that people are familiar with on PCs and consoles on a sort of handheld thing. So I'm really excited for it. I love this kind of stuff. And if you're a gamer, you probably should be too. These are cool times. Finally, with our last piece of news today, new calculations from astronomers have estimated that the universe has at least 10 times more galaxies in it than we used to think. Using pictures taken by the Hubble Space Telescope, astronomers have long estimated that about 200 billion galaxies exist in our universe. New studies have shown that this might not be the case. New methods have been used, which analyze old data from images and some math to create a proper 3D model of the universe as it developed. This model allows scientists to estimate the number of galaxies in the universe at any given time. When they ran this model and looked at the universe today, they found that it should contain something like 2 trillion galaxies. Once again, the old estimate was 200 billion. Earlier estimates were probably low for a couple of reasons. The Milky Way blocks much of the universe from our telescopes, so we can't even see most of it. And most galaxies are so far away that they're extremely dim. On top of all that, the universe itself is expanding. And in some cases, it can expand so fast that it actually stretches the light to such a point that we can't really see it. So there are a lot of obstacles that keep us from really kind of looking out and seeing all the galaxies in the universe. But with these new models, we've got a better idea of what's out there. I just think it's really cool to see how big the universe is, because it's weird. As technology gets more and more advanced, our world starts to seem smaller and smaller, but our universe starts to seem bigger and bigger. Hopefully someday we find a way to explore it. Anywho, that's all the big picture news I have for you today. It's not as heated or crazy or doom and gloom as it usually is, but you know what? Every once in a while, that's nice. It's nice to remember that science and technology and not our political stuff happens. It's refreshing. Anywho, I'm Tony Pearson coming to y'all on behalf of WHIP. Tune in next week for another episode of Big Picture News.